It's 1975, the year when a little shark movie called Jaws went on to become the most successful movie ever made and jump-started the career of a young director named Steven Spielberg. And that was part of the movie industry boom that was taking shape. A new generation of filmmaking and how the craft of movies was made began to take shape, and there needed to be voices out there to get the word out on what to see and what not to see. In Chicago, one PBS station was willing to provide a television audience that opportunity. After Roger Ebert won the Pulitzer and as Gene Siskel's career was on the rise, the local PBS station WTTW decided to launch a new film review show to get the word out on the new movies coming to town, interviews, red carpets, you name it. That show was called Opening Soon at a Theater Near You and premiered its very first episode on November 26, 1975.
The name of our show is Opening Soon at a Theater Near You, two film critics talking about the movies, and this is Roger Ebert, the film critic from the Chicago Sun-Times.
And right over here is Gene Siskel, the film critic from the Chicago Tribune and Channel 2 News.
The point of our show is to sort of be a news magazine about movies, and we want to show you what's playing in town, what's coming to town, and also maybe take you behind the scenes and show you a little bit about the movie business.
It was pretty clear from the moment they made it on the air that they weren't quite ready for the television spotlight just yet. The show featured the two of them sitting in director's chairs facing one another, and their way of speaking certainly felt more softer and more calmer than what we'd come to expect from them later on. Kind of like the equivalent back then to ASMR movie reviewing, pretty much. It definitely made for a very unique and certainly unusual approach to reviewing, but then again, these are two guys who had very rarely had any television appearances to their names at that point. Of the two, Gene was the one that was most prevalent to television, as he would occasionally do reviews for the local CBS affiliate, WBBM-TV.
The reason you didn't see the plane crashing into the building is that the film clip Warner Brothers supplied me with doesn't show the plane crash. Warner Brothers doesn't want you to see the plane crash into the building because it looks so cheap. But as a public service, I'm going to try to demonstrate the crash. I bought these toys this afternoon. Here's what the Medusa crash looks like. If this is a hit, I'm going to do the Burning of Atlanta tomorrow from Gone with the Wind.
Among other things not related to the movies, including covering many sports championships, as he was a big Chicago sports fan, and of course he was there for the Chicago Bulls' many championship celebrations in the 1990s. At the time, Gene had more TV exposure than Roger did, so naturally, it was going to take some time for them to be TV ready. Opening Soon at the Theater Near You was a monthly show with a new episode once a month for 2 years. After 2 successful seasons, Opening Soon at the Theater Near You was renamed Sneak Previews in 1977. By 1978, it became a bi-weekly show airing nationally on PBS. It grew to prominence with a review conversation banter format between opinionated film critics, notably for a time, Roger and Gene. By 1980, it was a weekly series airing on over 180 stations and the highest-rated weekly entertainment show in the history of public broadcasting. The two newspapers were competitors, and so were Siskel and Ebert. As Ebert wrote about Siskel's death in 1999, we both thought of ourselves as full-service, one-stop film critics. We don't see why the other one was quite necessary. We had been linked in a Faustian television format that brought us success at the price of autonomy. No sooner had I expressed a verdict on the movie, my verdict, then here comes Siskel with the arrogance to say I was wrong, or for that matter, the condescension to agree with me. It really felt like that. It was not an act. When we disagreed, there was incredulity. When we agreed, there was a kind of relief. In the television biz, they talk about chemistry. Not a thought was given to our chemistry. We just had it. Because from the day the Chicago Tribune made Gene its film critic, we were professional enemies. We never had a single meaningful conversation before we started to work on our TV program. Alone together in an elevator, we would study the numbers changing above the door.
Opening soon gave way to sneak previews, and a producer named Thea Flom took us out of those director's chairs and put us right into the balcony seats that we've never left.
When we began this show, it was on not once a week, but once a month. So I would meet them once a month. We would get together to have lunch to discuss the show. And they would argue about everything, because each of them was afraid that the other one was going to get ahead of him. So they would argue with each other about where we were going to have lunch, picking out the restaurant. They would flip a coin to see who would get to do the main review on each movie. They would flip a coin to see who would get to go first at the beginning of the show.
The tensions between the two men made the show's production more difficult and time-consuming at first. Making this rivalry even worse was the tension of our early tapings. It would take 8 hours to get one show in the can, with breaks for lunch, dinner, and fights. I would break down, or he would break down, or one of us would do something different and threw the other one off. Or as the accumulating angst would make our exchanges seem simply bizarre. There are many witnesses to the terrors of those days. Only when we threw away our clipboards and 3x5 cars did we get anything done. We finally started ad-libbing and the show began to work. We found we could tape a show in under an hour. Over time, the two men became close professional friends while remaining professional rivals, and Ebert said of their relationship before Siskel's death, no one else could possibly understand how meaningless was the hate, how deep was the love. The show featured two critics who presented short clips of movies in current release and debated their merits, energetically defending their remarks if the other critic disagreed. A designated Dog of the Week was also featured, with Spot the Wonder Dog barking on cue as an introduction.
This picks the week's worst movies.
That's right, Gina. My dog this week is a fish called Piranha.
Well, now, continuing on the subject of bad movies, here's Spot the Wonder Dog, the cinematic canine who can spot a bad flick easier than he can find a fire hydrant.
Oh, here he is, Gene.
My goodness, Swamp
Sparky
Thing.
the Wonder Dog leaping into the balcony. Hold on a minute, Gene. Here he is, Zeke the Wonder Dog, bounding into the balcony, jumping into the chair, sitting down, doing his trick,
And leaving
jumping
it.
out.
Episodes from the first 7 seasons ended with one of the hosts saying, "See you at the movies." Many episodes from seasons 8 through 14 and 17 through 21 ended with the host reminder to save us the aisle seats. Episodes from season 18 through 20, when it was known as Sneak Previews Goes Video, ended with the host reminder, "Don't forget to rewind the tape." Some episodes were known as the Take Two Show, which replaced reviews of recently released movies with theme topics such as women in danger and slasher films of the 1970s and early 80s. On one occasion, Siskel and Ebert even invited the viewers into a day in the lives as they screened films. They did an episode in 1981 taking a look at them getting ready to watch the new movie The Black Marble and showing how both their critical how they basically go to a movie and review their films.
Gene Siskel, please. Yeah, Gene? John Iltis. Can you make a screening of The Black Marble on Wednesday at 2 o'clock? Okay, good. I'll call Roger. Okay, thanks a lot.
That's how it begins. That's how a new movie comes to town, with a press agent first inviting Roger and me to a special screening, and then the public is lured into theaters by a coming attractions commercial. And exactly how Roger and I go to the movies as critics is the subject of this special Take-Two program on Sneak Previews. All that I know about The Black Marble before I go in to see the picture, that it's made by the same people who made The Onion Field last year, which gets me a little bit excited because I happen to like The Onion Field last year. In fact, I put it on my top 10 list of films for the entire year. Same director, Harold Becker, same screenwriter, Joseph Wambaugh. I'm looking forward to it on that basis. And on one other basis, a friend of mine, the TV critic who works here at the Tribune, Gary Deeb, he knows Wambaugh. Wambaugh showed him the film, The Black Marble, a month ago, and Deeb told me he liked it. So I've got that anticipation. He also told me, though, Deeb said it's a comedy. Now I'm skeptical a little bit because The Onion Field was a police thriller. This new one's a comedy. It's very tough to be able to do both kinds of films. So a little bit of anticipation and a little bit of skepticism before I go to see The Black Marble.
Oddly enough, I know less about The Black Marble than I usually know about a movie before I go to review it. I knew we were going to do it on this show, and so I deliberately tried to avoid finding out a whole lot about it. And so, what do I know about The Black Marble? I interviewed Joseph Wambaugh when he was making his previous film, The Onion Field, and so I know from that The Black Marble is directed by the same man, Harold Becker. I know that it's based on Wambaugh's only comic novel. I know it has something to do with the people who enter dogs in dog shows. And that's about it. I don't even know who the stars of this movie are.
Episodes like them going to the movies are very fascinating to watch nearly 50 years later, just to see how Roger and Gene handled the craft of reviewing back in the day compared to how general reviewers do it nowadays, and also seeing just what Chicago looked like back in that time period in the early 1980s. Because, I mean, granted, I've never been to Chicago before, but it's definitely something where it looks like a very different place than what it looks like nowadays. I mean, it's the definition of a time capsule back to a different time. Sneak Previews was a massive success in the early 1980s, but by 1982, contractual difficulties with WTTW led to Gene and Roger taking their talents elsewhere as syndicator Tribune Entertainment decided to pick the two up for a new, very similar review program entitled At the Movies with Siskel and Ebert. At the Movies premiered on September 26, 1982 in syndication, and not much really changed from Sneak Previews' format. Interestingly enough, the famous two thumbs up from Siskel and Ebert did not come out of the gate when the duo premiered. It wasn't until the duo moved from public access to At the Movies in 1982 that the two thumbs up method was used within the show based on an idea by Roger Ebert. And before that, the Romans.
Where did the thumbs idea come from?
Boy, I don't remember.
I came up with that idea. And before me, the Romans.
Why is the show Siskel and Ebert? And by the way, will it ever be Ebert and Siskel?
No.
You've signed on to Siskel and
There's a long story about that, a long story. You know, I'm older. I've been a movie critic longer. E comes before S in the alphabet. I've got the Pulitzer Prize, and yet it's called Siskel and Ebert. And if you want to know why that is, you can ask Siskel.
Flip of the coin. It was a flip of the coin. I would have been more than willing to have it be Ebert and Siskel, but it will never be that way.
Siskel and Ebert adopted the same format that they had used in the previous previous series sneak previews. Two critics from opposing newspapers view clips from the week's new movies discussing them, then pass judgment expressed in thumbs up to approve or thumbs down not worth seeing. During this run, they would adopt several elements that would make the show lively. For example, they would bring on an animal called Spot the Wonderlog to help lead into the segment called the Dog of the Week, covering the week's worst movies. Later, they used another animal, Aroma the Educated Skunk. Siskel and Ebert would also occasionally feature an X-ray segment in which they would discuss current trends happening in the movies. And it was during that time when Gene and Roger became more well-known around the world, as the two would then start beginning to make more appearances on other TV shows. Shows like The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, Late Night with David Letterman, Saturday Night Live, Nightline.
And what we really need from you gentlemen, being professional reviewers, is one solid opinion so folks won't be wasting their time 50% of the movies they attend. There's only one way to settle this thing. Let's go to the line and shoot some free throws. You want to get closer to the line, Roger? Would that help? There you are. Okay, all right. One more for Gene. Here we go. Oh, very nice. Tough luck, Roger. Gene, very nice. Thank you.
The sad thing about that is that we were hanging around there on the Letterman set for about an hour before the show started, and we were shooting baskets. And I got about 4 in a row, and you couldn't hit the side of a barn. And then when the show came on the air, suddenly he's in the final 4. I can't figure it out.
Well, in another movie, seems like old times, I know that the best thing there was played by Chubby's hand. He was hiding under the bed when Goldie Hawn stepped on her hand with her high-heeled shoes. The hand played the scene, though, like Marlon Brando. It was really one of the great acting hand jobs of all time.
There's one thing, there is a tendency for somebody who is naturally funny, as Chevy is, to try to get laughs by standing there and ad-libbing when somebody else is trying to talk.
That's right.
And they became so popular that they were beginning to get parodied in a number of different occasions in such things as the Claymation Easter special from Will Vinson.
Next, a classic in claymation. A great example of how
A thumbs down, a cinematic sellout.
Wrong. Even you can see it.
I can hardly see it all. They're artsy, pretentious, and pseudo-intellectual. And you did that on purpose.
I did not.
Roll the film. Lord bucket.
Lizard breath.
And even in movies such as Robert Towne's Hollywood Shuffle.
What's up, man? Welcome to Sneaking in the Movies. My name is Speed, and this is my homeboy, Tyrone. And we are like movie critics and shit.
Well, not really. Peep this. Each week, me and my boy, you know, we go to different theaters and stuff and sneak in and check out the movie.
Then we come back and tell y'all what's up. Like if y'all should pay money and shit.
But by 1986, just like what happened 4 years prior, Tribune Entertainment and Siskel and Ebert fell into contract difficulties during the negotiations, and thus the two left at the movies. But they wouldn't be out of work for too long, as just as soon as they left Tribune, somebody was waiting for them to give them their biggest draw and audience to date. Disney.